Question. Has there been a decrease in the number of incidents that have happened, at least in this country? Or, because it seemed like this was talked about a lot, and there were a lot of sightings at some time, whether it was over the, prairie states. But that seems, you don't read about it very much today.
That's the kicker. It's not a question of how much is going on, it's how much do we hear about it. I check most of my audiences at the end of my lecture, I don't have guts enough to do it at the beginning, and find that 10% of the attendees believe they've seen a flying saucer. But then I ask, how many of you reported what you saw? 90% of the hands go down. MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, is getting over 600 reports a month. You don't hear about most of those cases, where the public's grown accustomed, I guess, or the media is unwilling to get involved. How many UFO reporters do you know? And I know of 2 competent journalists who are really into UFOs. That's an awful small number, George Knapp being one.
And what about in other countries? Are they reported, or, is that?
I find sightings everywhere.
The sightings are very common, but what isn't uniform are proper distribution networks or reporting systems that are in place. So what we've developed here in the U.S. are a number of websites that collect reports, and as I mentioned earlier, my estimate is a rough one, but it's not less than 10,000 reports actually are written by people per year, 10,000 in North America, that's U.S. and Canada. Elsewhere in the world, there are obviously many sightings. They're increasing, they're not decreasing, because people are now having better capabilities of reporting these. One of the problems with less developed nations elsewhere in the world in years past is just, if you saw a UFO, who do you report it to? There was really no mechanisms to do it, and that's improving now. So now we're seeing reports out of China, India, Africa, and really around the world. But still, there aren't, there's not a lot of infrastructure among civilian groups, for example, who really would be the ones that publicize this, to get the word out. What you have are YouTube channels and people doing this on their own. What really I think is needed is a kind of coordinated global kind of organizational effort, and hopefully we'll get that.
Another problem is language. I am constantly confronted with the issue that something happens in China or South America or a country that does not speak English, and I'm an American journalist trying to report so that an American audience can understand. And I have worked sometimes for an entire week just trying to find a reporter in China or someplace who could help me do a translation so that you could get closer to firsthand facts. And it is so difficult. We're on a planet and where communication is basically blocked, whether it is country to country or even neighborhood to neighborhood in China, because the syntactical differences in the language there are so overwhelming that a man I know who lives there, works there from England, who tries to help, you still have translation problems there within very short distances. And so you take that to this complex phenomena. I know for a fact, every month, across my desk and in my computer world, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reports coming from around the world. How do we follow up unless we have translators and an open government policy around the world where people feel that they can report honestly what they've encountered without some sort of retribution by the government, which is distinctly the way it is working in the United States, or criticism from fellow human beings. Humans are more afraid of ridicule and criticism from humans than they are of non-humans.
Can I just
You're absolutely right.
can I make a point that I made in my presentation, which sort of sums this up? The problem is the coverage. It's not how many sightings there are. The more people are covering it, the more sightings you're going to get. Basically, it comes down to the story of Chase Brandon. Chase Brandon was identified himself as the second most powerful person in the CIA outside the director to speak publicly on behalf of the CIA. He was the liaison for CIA to Hollywood. He could speak publicly on behalf of the CIA. He comes out in front of 2 million people and says, I saw the files, I saw a box, Roswell was real, there was aliens, this is for real, and nobody covered the story. It's as simple as that. It's just not being covered.
Thank you.